Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is George Mack, and I'm the Involvement and Engagement Officer here at Alzheimer's Research UK. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to In Conversation at Christmas 2025. With our speakers today, we'll be looking back on the past year and what's been happening in dementia research. Before we get into the discussion, I'm going to go over a tiny bit of housekeeping. During the event today, you're welcome to switch on the subtitles using the CC button on the bottom of the screen. These subtitles will be generated automatically, and so they might not be 100% accurate during the live event, but they will be edited so that they are correct when we send out the event recording. After the event, we will send you a link to the event recording where you'll be able to watch it on our website and our YouTube channel. This is where you'll be able to find all previous recordings of events just like this one. We will be asking a mix of pre-submitted and live questions on today. If you would like to ask a question during today's discussion, you will need to click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, which will bring you to a box where you can type your question. We received lots of really good questions ahead of the event today, and we will try to answer as many of these as we can during our discussion. But it's important to note we are not able to answer any personal medical questions. We're now quickly going to ask you some poll questions so we can find out a little bit more about you. And these should pop onto your screen now. There's a couple of questions that we wanted to ask. The first one was, we'd like to know the rate of your knowledge of dementia research. A couple of options, we've got kind of high, average, low. You don't have to answer these. We'd also want to know your reason for attending today, whether that's you're caring for a loved one or just kind of generally interested in dementia research. And we also want to know if you've attended these before. So we'll give it a couple of seconds and we'll let some of these come through. And I can see already a bit of a mix on most of these, which is good. A lot of people saying they've kind of got an average dementia knowledge, which is great. And I think most of them have already been answered, which is great. So I think we can go ahead and close this now. Already. And so welcome to those who've already been to these events and for anyone new as well. And for all those who are new, I'm going to briefly introduce Alzheimer's Research UK. And we are the UK's leading dementia research charity. We have been working to revolutionise the way we treat, diagnose and prevent dementia by funding the best research, powering brilliant scientists and working with leading organisations around the world. But this is only possible thanks to our amazing supporters who donate, fundraise, volunteer and raise awareness of our work, plus much more. With your support, we will keep going until everyone is free from the heartbreak of dementia. So today is a chance to hear about some of the research we fund and our rider work as well. Before we jump to our speakers, I'd like to give a quick end-of-year snapshot of where we stand in dementia research. Right now, there's still no cure for the underlying diseases that cause dementia, but research gives us our best chance in changing that. And that's why it's so important that we keep pushing progress forward. Right now, there are hundreds of trials underway across the world, aiming to find a new way to treat Alzheimer's and other types of dementia. And 2025 has seen more clinical trials than in previous years. We now understand there is lots of things we can do to help support your brain health. Research suggests that there's nearly half of dementia cases could be prevented or delayed if 14 key risk factors were tackled. But it's important to say that doing all the right things doesn't guarantee you won't get dementia, and there's still many factors we can't control. But this research does show there's a huge opportunity for both individuals and governments to take action and reduce risk where we can. You may have heard about the two new drugs, lecanemab and donanemab. These are known as amyloid treatments because they target and help remove a protein called amyloid that builds up in the brain called Alzheimer's disease. This is just one of the ways we might tackle dementia, but we know it's not the only one. We need a range of approaches to target the different ways dementia can develop and affect the brain. And it's just one of the ways we're trying to help tackle that. We've also continued this year to work on identifying blood tests that can help diagnose dementia. The Blood Biomarker Challenge is a major research program supported by a partnership of funders, including Alzheimer's Research UK, aiming to bring blood tests for diagnosing dementia into the NHS by 2029. Earlier this year, in January and again in September, we announced the first people joining trials to help test these exciting developments in real-life scenarios. There's much more happening behind the scenes, so do keep an eye on our news and our resources. And with that out of the way, it's now my pleasure to introduce our guests today. First up, we have Professor Hugh Markus, who is a neurologist and researcher at the University of Cambridge. So Hugh, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yes, so I'm a neurologist and I primarily look after patients with stroke, and I spend about half my time looking after patients and half my time doing research. But I've become increasingly interested in why certain patients with stroke develop dementia. And this is now takes up a lot of my research time. And we're particularly trying to discover new mechanisms that damage the blood vessels and cause dementia that we can intervene in with new therapies.
Lovely, thank you. And next up is our very own Dr Isolde Radford, or as we call her here, Izzy Radford, who's from our Policy and Public Affairs team here at Alzheimer's Research UK. Izzy, can you tell me a bit more about your work, please?
Thanks, George. So my role here at Alzheimer's Research UK is about making sure that the latest dementia research doesn't just stay in the lab, that it actually shapes real change in the NHS. So I work closely with scientists like you, with healthcare professionals, policymakers, and people with lived experience of dementia to turn new discoveries into practical policies and better healthcare. For me, it's all about bridging that gap between research and everyday practice so that families see the benefits of research as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. And rounding up our lineup is Marian and Geoff Wheeler. Marian was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2014. Since then, she has taken part in 3 clinical trials for dementia alongside her husband and study partner, Geoff. The couple are passionate about sharing how taking part in dementia research has helped shape them have hope. And we have a very nice quick video just to introduce them in their own words.
I'm Marian and I'm living with Alzheimer's.
I'm Geoff Wheeler, and I'm married to Marian. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2014. Marian's been on several clinical trials and they've all been, without exception, positive. People have been so kind, they've gone out of their way to make us welcome, to reassure us, and there are so many benefits.
All the nurses were very good and would say, "Oh, hello, Marian," roll up your sleeve, all that sort of thing. And they were very kind and nice towards me, yes, always, yeah.
We discussed with the family whether taking part in a trial was a good idea, and they were universally in favour of it. They just said, yes, just go for it, you've got nothing to lose, and they were very, very positive.
That's very nice. Thank you very much for that video. And now that we've had a chance to meet Marian and Geoff through that video, let's dive into some pre-submitted questions we have gotten. As we got about 35 minutes to have some nice discussions, I think. Let me get through that. So Marian and Geoff, we've just seen a video of you taking part in clinical trials. We'd love to hear a bit more about the trials you've taken part in and what the experience has been like, really. You might be slightly on mute.
So,
perfect, thank you.
First of all, thank you for inviting us.
Yes, no problem.
as you heard on the video, it's nearly 12 years ago that we started getting worried about Marian's memory. And like a lot of other people, I guess, of our age, you just think, well, it's old age. But I think it came to a head when Marian used to play table tennis in a league, and she used to drive herself to away matches. And there was one particular match which was about 5 miles away from here, and she was a little bit worried about how she would find it. So we looked it up on the map, and we showed her on the map. And next day she said, well, I'm still not very sure. Can we do a dummy run? So we did that. And then on the day she said, well, would you come with me? And I thought, something wrong here that's not just memory, just not just old age, because you've been used to driving all over the place. Go to Wales on your own, I remember. So I thought it was unusual. So at that point, we contacted the GP and explained the problem. And we were referred to a memory clinic. And we were very lucky in some ways that the diagnosis for us was very, very quick. I know these days people wait months, if not years, for a diagnosis, but we had the...
Yes, it was fairly quick, wasn't it?
It was. It came quickly. Of course, it was a huge shock, even though it was expected. It was still a shock. It was fear of the unknown and feeling utterly helpless. What could we do? But a few months after that, there was a news bulletin on BBC about a new drug called aducanumab, which is actually the forerunner of the drugs that you mentioned, I believe, George, lecanemab and donanemab. And we spoke to our children and said, what do you think? Should we investigate it? And they both agreed, as you heard. So we contacted the researchers, which were in London. We were invited for screening. Screening took a couple of days and involved...
Yes.
Questions, lots of questions for you.
Questions, and try and remember the answers too.
MRI, physical examination, but at the end of it, we got the message that yes, we were okay, and we could sign up for the trial. I say we because I was classed as a study partner. Study partner is very important in all these trials, partly to make sure that the person arrives on time and doesn't miss an appointment, but also it's a question of looking out for any side effects, any symptoms that might arise that you might not have noticed, I might notice, and it was my job to report them. So that's the job of the study partner. It involved an infusion once a month.
It did, yes.
You found that not too bad, did you?
Yes, fine. Yes, no bother at all, really.
Took about an hour, and we sat there and read a book and had some lunch. Trial lasted about 2 years, and then it was stopped because the sponsor was not sure whether it was working or not. So they took a bit of time to reassess the results that they had so far. In the meantime, we signed up for another trial, completely different in a different organisation. And then eventually the trial was started again. So all in all, we've been on and off trials for about 7 years.
Yes.
And as Marian said earlier in the video, it was a very, very positive experience for us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really, really glad to hear that, and thank you for sharing. It's kind of based on hearing that, I'd like to learn a bit more about kind of maybe the research that's kind of going on. So if I could go towards Hugh now, what in your view are the most exciting recent advances in treating vascular dementia? And also, could you help explain maybe the difference between vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease for people who don't know?
Yeah, sure. So dementia really just describes a syndrome where the memory and other cognitive functions don't behave normally, and it usually comes on gradually over time. And this can be caused by a number of different things. The most common is Alzheimer's, as you said. That's where you get these proteins, amyloid and tau, that accumulate in the brain. The second most common is vascular dementia. And this occurs due to any blood vessel disease that can damage the brain due to shortage of oxygen from narrowing of blood vessels and things like that. And the most common cause of vascular dementia is where the small blood vessels in the brain become damaged. We call this small vessel disease. And this is what I'm particularly interested in research, because it's a huge problem, and yet we can't treat it very well at all.
Thank you very much, Hugh, for that. That gives us some good insights into the science there. I was just wondering if, yeah, you mentioned obviously the small vessel disease, and it sounds like a really important next step. Is there anything we can learn maybe from this research that can cover maybe all different types of dementia, not just vascular dementia itself, from the research that you're doing?
Yeah, well, more generally from people, all research is sort of a team effort, and lots and lots of people are working worldwide on these problems. But the things that I think are most exciting are two, really. One is that it's been shown that if you treat vascular risk factors, particularly blood pressure, and really lower it quite low, particularly in midlife, you can prevent dementia or reduce the risk of all types of dementia, not only vascular dementia, but also Alzheimer's dementia. So we've known for a long time that all these risk factors, appear to increase the risk of dementia, but we've now got really good data that if you tackle it hard, you can actually prevent dementia. So for me, that's really exciting, because it's got a huge impact on the general population. This could make an enormous impact, and I think is often not focused on, because it's not quite as exciting as a new sort of monoclonal antibody or something. So that's one area. More specifically, we've not had any really good treatments for vascular dementia when it occurs, or for small vessel disease, but we're now beginning to discover completely new pathways that cause the disease, particularly from genetic studies. So we've collaborated with groups around the world to get thousands of people with these problems, and then we can try and identify new genes, new pathways. And in fact, we're following on from some of these exciting results with work funded by Alzheimer's Research UK in a project at the moment.
It's great to hear some collaboration going on a little bit more. And thank you. Yeah, thank you. That gives some great insight again into the science. And I'm going to look towards you now, Izzy. Hugh mentioned some potential advancements in maybe some treatments and some breakthroughs, but I was wondering, how can we actually turn these kind of research breakthroughs into real change? So once progress is made, say after a clinical trial, what does it take to actually turn that into something that someone can actually access?
Thanks, George. So this is actually quite a long and complex process, and it takes many years. I would think of it more of a relay race with lots of handover points than a sprint. Finding something promising in the lab is actually just the start line. After that, every potential treatment has to go through years of careful testing, first in labs and clinical trials with real people. Those trials need to make sure that the treatment is safe and that it works for lots of different people, not just the few people in the initial trial. And it's not just scientists that need to do all that work, it takes a whole team. So industry partners get involved, there are regulators, the NHS, policymakers, all working together to move things forward. And even once a treatment passes all its tests, it still needs to be checked over by those government regulators. They look at whether it works, whether it's safe, and if it's good value for money for the NHS. And only after all that can it be approved for use by patients on the NHS. And then we still need to make sure that the NHS is actually ready to deliver those new treatments. So that means having trained healthcare staff, the right tools to diagnose people in the first place, and clear guidelines on how to use those new treatments. A really good example of this right now is the two drugs that you mentioned earlier on, lecanemab and donanemab. So they've shown lots of promise in research. They've been through clinical trials, and they have been approved as safe and effective by regulators, but they haven't yet been approved as cost effective for use on the NHS. So even when you see exciting headlines in the news, it can still take a really long time for treatments to reach people. And at the heart of all of this are the people living with dementia and their families, because everything we do is about making a real difference to them. And that's why it's so important to hear from people like Marian and Geoff.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for explaining that for us. And as like you said, it seems like quite a challenge to bridge that gap. And I was wondering if I can move now again on to Hugh. You mentioned some of your work uses kind of MRI scans to study blood vessels in the brain. Can you tell us how that research is helping us to understand vascular dementia a little bit more clearly?
Yes, well, I mean, With an MRI scan, you can see an amazing detail in the brain, and we now have these new scanners which have very high field strength, so big magnets, and these allow us to see in even more detail. So just to give you one example, um, small vessel disease is caused by damage in blood vessels which are, perhaps half a millimeter in size, and normally on an MRI scan you can't see them at all. So the only way you could see them would be actually a pathology, after somebody's died. But with a new scanner called 7T, which we have at Cambridge, we can now see these blood vessels for the first time. So we can take people and we can look at the blood vessels and say, how are these blood vessels affected in the disease? And we can even look at blood flow within the vessels and say, is there anything we can do to increase the blood flow within the vessels? So, technology is moving on extremely fast. And this is allowing us to do things we couldn't do before. And much of my work in MRI is really saying, can the MRI help us better understand what's causing the damage? And also, can it give us a readout for new treatments? Because one of the challenges with a new treatment is if you want to say, well, does it reduce, prevent vascular dementia, you may need a few thousand people to look at. So you need ways of looking at, tens or 20s, 30s. Does this treatment look promising? Should we take it forward? So using MRI, you can say, well, does it improve parameters on the MRI? Like, does it improve blood flow in these blood vessels? If it does, that's very exciting. And then you can move on to the next step. We just heard from Izzy how you need all these steps in the pathway.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And then in terms of this, like, maybe amazing new imaging tool, can it relate to other types of dementia as well? Or is it mostly focused on, obviously you mentioned in the blood vessels? Is there any other kind of types of dementia you think that may be effective for?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I mean, classically in Alzheimer's, you can look at a part of the brain called hippocampus, which is very involved in memory, which very early on shrinks. So that's one of the ways you can detect early changes in Alzheimer's. So you can look at all sorts of dementia. I think it's more useful in vascular because
Yeah.
you can actually look at the blood vessels as well, whereas what we can't do is look at the microscopic level. So, where the proteins aggregating amyloid and tau aggregating, we can't see that. But there are ways now that we can actually detect the amyloid and tau in the brain using a different sort of imaging called PET imaging, where you get a compound that binds to whatever you want to look at, say amyloid or tau, and also has a radioactive marker on it, and then you can detect where it is in the brain. So we can actually look at that too, but that's not MRI. That's a different sort of imaging. But it's done widely now in research.
That's great, thank you. And I think we just had kind of a live question through that kind of relates to that. And the question kind of says, how many of these advanced MRI scanners are there? And then where are they located? I know you said you've got one in Cambridge, but is that kind of the only place where we've kind of got
No,
them?
so I mean, MRI scans are present in every hospital in the UK, and they can actually do a lot of imaging. So you've got enough. If we're able to get access to them for trials, you can do trials throughout the UK in every district hospital. But these sort of more advanced imaging, 7T, there are probably, I would say, about 8 in the UK, spread around the whole country, something like that.
So it's growing a little bit at least. So that sounds
Yeah,
quite
and they're all formed into a network where people help each other with research across the
brilliant.
7T network, it's called, yes.
Yeah, that's a great example of people coming together again. And I'm just going to thank you for building on that. And yeah, another big thing that's kind of come about this year again is another big year for blood biomarkers. I was wondering, Izzy, could you explain a little bit about blood biomarkers, and if the blood biomarker test proves effective for early diagnosis, would the NHS be able to administrate it, do you think?
Yeah, sure. So to explain a little bit about how these blood tests work, they're looking for specific proteins or markers, which is why they're called biomarkers, in a blood sample that are linked to Alzheimer's disease. And these biomarkers can give doctors a really early indication that changes are happening in the brain even before somebody's experiencing symptoms. Now, at the moment, these are being developed mainly for Alzheimer's disease, but the hope is that in the future, similar tests could help to diagnose other diseases that cause dementia as well. At the moment, if this kind of blood test proves effective for early diagnosis, the question of whether the NHS will be able to deliver them is something that Alzheimer's Research UK is actively exploring, along with other funding partners, through the Blood Biomarker Challenge that you mentioned earlier. And this is funding two major trials called ADAPT and READOUT that are already running in NHS memory clinics to test whether such a blood test can provide an accurate and early diagnosis for Alzheimer's disease, and whether it would be feasible and affordable for the NHS to roll them out more widely. There are challenges. So the NHS is already under a lot of pressure, as we know. So introducing a new test would mean training new healthcare professionals. It would mean updating the way that people are diagnosed currently and investing in the lab infrastructure that's needed to process those tests. But blood tests are quite familiar and safe. Clinicians know how to deliver them, and the infrastructure that's needed is already there, for example, with blood tests that look at testing for prostate cancer. So it's a much smaller hill to climb than increasing capacity for some of the more expensive brain scans, for example.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I think we've heard a little bit more about research and how it might be delivered. But again, research only moves forward because of people who choose to take part. So Marian and Geoff, what would you say to someone who's unsure about getting involved in a research study? Have you got anything, words for them potentially?
I think the first thing I would say is do your research. Find out as much as you can. If you're offered the chance of going on a trial, find out as much as you can about the trial. Think about all the practicalities. Where is it? How easy is it to get to? Bear in mind that a trial might last for a year or more. So whereas travelling in the summer may be pleasurable, you're still going to be doing it in the depths of winter. So think about all those sorts of things. See if the sponsor is going to be flexible in time so that you can travel out to the rush hour, for example. Find out exactly what it involves. Is it tablets, which obviously can be taken at home, or do you have to travel there for infusions? Think about or research the possible side effects. There are always, a list of possible side effects. Discuss those with the clinician. Find out how severe they might be or not. Talk about whether you might be on a placebo. Placebo is a dummy drug that you might be on, so that the clinicians have got a comparison. Hot off the press, Marian and I were in Cambridge yesterday, being screened for a further trial, believe it or not. We discovered that there's a 2 in 7 chance that if we're accepted, that Marian will be on a placebo, which is about a quarter. So we thought that was acceptable. Having said all of that, if you're happy with the answers to all those, go for it. Of course, it's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to go on a trial like that. But if you do, then just go for it. There are so many benefits. I mean, apart from the fact that the drug actually may help you. You're very, very well monitored, so you're getting free health checks every so often. And it's just been a very positive experience. Of course, they're not. Research is not just drug trials. There are other types of research. So if you don't want to take part in testing a new drug, there are trials which involve questionnaires. There are online activities, lots of other things. So yes, I would say go for it.
Great answer. Thank you very much for that. And it was interesting you mentioned about you kind of get extra kind of screening and testing as well when you're going through it, which is a thing I wasn't aware of when you're getting the trials as well. So that's great to hear.
Can I add a comment there, George? I think Geoff's exactly right on that. And there's a lot of studies from stroke showing that if people enter clinical trials, even if they're in the placebo arm, they do better than people who don't enter clinical trials. And I'm sure this is due to the fact that people in clinical trials are monitored closely and they're going to centres where the clinicians are really interested because they're wanting to do clinical trials. So they're very interested. So generally, it's you do better if you're in a centre where there are clinical trials.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, thanks for that added comment as well, Hugh.
Yeah.
And actually, the next question I got is for you. There's been a lot of kind of big news this year, even though it hasn't been kind of one single massive breakthrough, but a real momentum in research. And one of the big themes in dementia research this year has been kind of prevention and understanding risk. So I was going to ask, like, what can people do to reduce their risk, and how much of actually is dementia risk actually preventable, if you don't mind?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I think it's something that has been neglected, as I said earlier. So if you look at these very big studies in whole population, it's been suggested that up to half or perhaps even more of dementia risk can be prevented by treating, preventable risk factors like cardiovascular risk factors, educating, getting better education, hearing, and so on. The question is, how much of that can you reverse by treating those things? And that's in a way why I think the data on blood pressure is so exciting, because it's shown you can really change the course of it. But to do all these studies in multiple different areas is going to take a very long time. So we've got to say, well, what can we do now? And I think, we have to address all of these, but some are on a society level. So we know that if you have more years of education associated with low risk of dementia, obviously we can't change that ourselves, but we can change that in society and improve education for young people. There are other things we can do ourselves. We can treat our cardiovascular risk factors like blood pressure, smoking, cholesterol, particularly in midlife, get those checked by the GP. As we get older, there are other things we can do. We know that if you have poor hearing, which is often undetected, this seems to accelerate dementia. So, if you're worried at all about your hearing, the lesson is to go get your hearing checked and get a hearing aid if you need help. And then even further down the line, we know that people who have good social networks seem to do better, and perhaps the dementia doesn't accelerate as quickly, or they're less likely to get dementia. So we need to encourage people as they get older to have good social networks, places they can meet and interact. So I think it's a combination of all these different things together that are important.
Absolutely. That really does summarize kind of how many different kind of risk factors there are and how many different areas there are we need to kind of look into as well.
But I think it's very hopeful that there are things we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we've just not to, we desperately want the magic bullet for dementias, but at the same time, we shouldn't forget that there is quite a lot we can do in society to reduce the burden of dementia.
Great, thank you very much. And Izzy, kind of building on a bit on that as well, what is the top thing that needs to happen really so that we can get to a cure faster? Is it, like you said, is it reducing the risk factors? Is it kind of doing more clinical trials? Do we need more funding, or do we need more people to participate in trials? What is like the key thing do you think we need to kind of get to that cure a little bit faster?
Well, you know me, George, I'm going to break the rules here. I can't pick one thing. I need at least three. Sorry about that. But it really does need a combination to speed up progress towards both prevention and a cure. And the first is funding, which you mentioned. So we need ongoing investment in research and innovation. Without steady funding, it's really tough to keep making those discoveries that move us forward. The second is for people to take part in research in clinical trials. We need more people, both those who are living with dementia and healthy volunteers, to take part in trials. And the more people who get involved, the faster we can test new treatments and figure out what really works. If anyone listening today is interested, do check out Join Dementia Research platform as a brilliant way to get started. You can find information on our website. And third is early diagnosis, which we talked about blood tests earlier on. The sooner that we can diagnose those diseases that are causing dementia, the better the chance we have to get people on treatments when it makes a real difference. Often by the time symptoms show up, a lot of changes have already happened in the brain. If we can detect earlier, we can step in sooner and hopefully slow things down. So if you take anything away, it's that we need all three: funding, people to take part in research, and early diagnosis. And if I can just add a quick call to action, if you're interested, please consider joining either a research study or as a campaigner for Alzheimer's Research UK, because lending your voice really helps us secure the kind of funding and focus that we need for breakthroughs in research.
Very much. And going back to Marian and Geoff, from your perspective, looking back, and we talked quite a bit about research, but what do you feel you've gained from kind of taking part in clinical trials for dementia? Do you feel like you've gained any extra knowledge or anything else that you'd kind of like to share with us today?
Yeah, people often ask us or ask me whether I think the actual drug helped, and the honest answer is I don't know, but you're doing pretty well after 11, 12 years, so I think it did, but I can't be sure about that. But we certainly benefited from the regular checkups. One of the things they found was that Marian was just starting to get a bit of osteoporosis. We wouldn't have had any idea of that beforehand, but it showed up on one of the scans and immediately started on calcium treatment. And so that's a good benefit. But also it's a chance to meet researchers, and you feel as if you're at the cutting edge. It's just a good place to be. And as Hugh mentioned earlier, the more social interactions you get, the better. So that was another plus. Going to different places, meeting different people, it all helps. And I suppose just the satisfaction of knowing that we've done our little bit to help the body of knowledge.
Yes.
Sharing that as well. And we've got another kind of live question that's come through, and I think this one would be best answered by Hugh. Is there any significant difference between Alzheimer's and vascular dementia in terms of progression of the condition, i.e. kind of steady decline or sudden drops?
So there are quite a lot of differences. First of all, in the presentation, usually vascular dementia affects the deep part of the brain, the sort of wiring we call the white matter, which is what we use to do automatic functions. So often people with vascular dementia will get problems with automatic functions first. So the things we don't even think we're doing, like multitasking is one where you're trying to constantly do two tasks at once, or attention. They'll often be affected, whereas Alzheimer's affects the sort of more highly developed part of the brain, which underlie things like memory and orientation. So they'll often be affected earlier in Alzheimer's. So there are differences. The progression, they both do progress, but they have slightly different sort of orders of progression, because again, the symptoms that you get will depend on which parts of the brain are affected, and because they affect different parts of the brain, they will progress in slightly different ways. I think it's fair to say, yes.
Thank you very much. And I think we're already kind of starting to get to the end of the time today. And I'm just looking at time. So maybe there's a kind of an end question that we can all kind of go together with. And I think someone has asked one, and it kind of goes really along those lines. So kind of what research gives you hope, and what would you say to someone looking to get involved? And I think that if we can start with maybe Hugh first on that one. And I can repeat the question if...
Yeah, no, I think I think I've highlighted some of the areas I think are really exciting. And I think what's really exciting is we're beginning to understand what causes damage to these small blood vessels, and it's only by doing that we can develop new treatments. The other thing I would say is that what we desperately need in vascular dementia is more people researching in it. And it's been very much a neglected area. And it's only by getting people interested in it that we're going to make the advances. So it's such an interesting area. I'd really encourage people to highlight it and get involved in it, and young researchers to get involved in the area. So yeah, I have hope that we can improve things.
That's brilliant. Great to hear. And to Izzy next as well.
Thank you. I think what gives me the most hope is that we are seeing incredible progress and momentum across every part of dementia research, not just in one area. Just this year, we have had the first 2 drugs, and they may not be available on the NHS, but it's the first time that a drug has actually been able to move the dial on the progress of Alzheimer's disease, and that's really exciting. We've got blood tests that are doing really well in a research setting, and I'm hopeful that we'll start to see those come into clinical practice in the next few years. And we're also gaining a much deeper understanding of the things that we can do ourselves to reduce our risk of developing dementia, but also the things that we need government and society to do to help reduce the risk of people developing dementia in later life.
Very much, is he? And yeah, lastly, on to Geoff and Marian. So the same question again. What about research gives you hope, and what would you say to someone getting involved?
Well, I think we're looking for progress in all the stages. We want better insights into the causes of Alzheimer's and dementia, better diagnostic tools, and faster and more consistent diagnosis, and better treatment for all stages. Eventually, a cure.
And is there any kind of last kind of statement you say to anyone who was looking to kind of get involved in clinical trials? Any kind of last quick statement at all that you'd like to add?
What would you say to anyone who's thinking of taking part in a trial? What would you say?
Yes, we're quite happy to take part in drug trials, aren't we?
But for anybody else, what would you say?
For anyone else? Yes, go for it.
Go for it. There we go.
Go for it. Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. And I would like to say a big thank you to all our speakers joining us today and taking part to answer our questions. I feel like that could have gone on for a lot longer, but I think we're starting to get to the end of our time. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone for now, and thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
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 And before we go, I'd like, we have some final information to give. Firstly, we'll do a quick poll to help us understand how we found today's event. So similar to what we did last time, and this just helps us understand what we need to do next time to make it a bit more appropriate and get a better understanding of what people want to do about these types of events. So I'll just let that come through now. And it's looking fairly positive at the moment. So thank you very much for submitting the feedback through. We'll be sending a more detailed feedback survey to you later today. So please do share any comments with us as they help us understand what was working well and what we could do in terms of improvement. So I think we can close the poll now. I think most people have answered that. But we've had a lot of questions come through today, and we do know that some of them we weren't able to answer. So in some cases, you might want a more personalised information or some signposting, and our dementia info line is here to help. The team can answer any questions you have, or they can signpost you to all other organisations who can offer support. There's some information on the screen there, and we can put some in the chat, and we send them out a little bit later. And I think this was also mentioned as well, but based on today's discussion, you might be interested in finding out how to get involved in dementia research studies. And Join Dementia Research is a service that you can match yourself to research studies that you're suitable to take part in. Anyone over the age of 18 can register, and you do not need to have a dementia diagnosis to take part in the studies. You can find out more on their website, or again, by calling the Dementia Research info line. We'll post some more details in the chat and include some follow-up emails. And I will just say they're very, very close to 100,000 sign-ups at the moment. I think a couple of thousand off, and we'd really like to get to that point. So if you have any interest, please do sign up. Again, you don't need to do it to actually take part once you've signed up, but it's just a way that you can look at research studies that you're suitable to take part in. And we are busy planning our next events for 2026, and can share some details of our first event taking place on 1 p.m. Tuesday, the 24th of March, where we'll be exploring what research can tell us about dementia risk. And you'll hear from scientists and again have a chance to answer your questions during a live online session. But thank you for coming today and taking the time to find out more about dementia research. Thank you for all your support that has got us to this point. And if you're interested in other ways to support the work of Alzheimer's Research UK, check out our website for lots of ways to get involved. A huge thank you for joining us today. And thanks a lot for the questions. I hope you find it useful. I wish you a peaceful Christmas and end to 2025, and hope you can join us next year. Goodbye.